This is CNN Breaking News.
And we begin with the breaking news on the next critical steps in the ceasefire and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. The Israeli Security Cabinet preparing to vote within hours, paving the way for a full cabinet vote on Saturday. CNN's Jeremy Diamond has more on the timetable and the potential obstacles, a warning. This report includes some graphic images.
The Israeli Prime Minister was supposed to start his day like this, convening his security cabinet to approve the newly inked ceasefire and hostage release deal. Instead, the Prime Minister's office issuing this dramatic statement, accusing Hamas of trying to extort last-minute concessions, saying the cabinet will not convene until the mediators notify Israel that Hamas has accepted all elements of the agreement. After 8 hours of limbo, the deal appeared to be back on track. An Israeli official telling CNN the security cabinet will now convene tomorrow morning. As for Netanyahu's political wrangling, far from over. His national security minister Ben Gvir now vowing to resign.
If this reckless deal is approved and implemented, the Jewish Power Party will not be part of the government and will withdraw from it.
Fellow far-right minister Bezalel Smotrich is also threatening to leave the coalition government over the deal. The finance minister declaring a clear condition for our remaining in the government is absolute certainty of returning to war with great force after the first phase of the deal is over. Amid the political wrangling, the anguish of hostage families like Ruth Strum, whose sons are both being held hostage in Gaza. She says only one is expected to be released in the first phase of the deal.
It is not easy for a mother to hear this. It is more difficult for me thinking about what will happen with them.
In Gaza, the wait for the ceasefire looks like this. Israel's attacks unrelenting. In the 24 hours since Israel and Hamas reached the ceasefire agreement, Israeli strikes have killed at least 83 people, including 23 children, according to Gaza's civil defense. As the bodies pile up, one man pleads with his sister's lifeless body. "Wake up, Hala, wake up," he cries. "The war is over." Hala was just days away from a life free from the threat of bombs and bullets. But as the dead and the wounded continue to flow into this hospital, it is clear Hala will not be this war's last victim. The question now is how many more will it claim?
We urge the meditators who brokered this truce to hurry up making it come into effect. For it to be today is better than tomorrow. For it to be at 7 is better than 8, because there are martyrs every hour.
Amid the ruins of Gaza, every hour also brings hope that it will all end soon. And Wolf, we are anticipating that security cabinet vote will happen tomorrow, but the full cabinet vote is likely not going to happen until Saturday evening, and that has now thrust a major question mark over whether or not this ceasefire deal will in fact be implemented starting on Sunday as was previously scheduled. The Supreme Court first needs to hear petitions from people who would like to prevent the release of Palestinian prisoners in exchange for those hostages. Wolf.
All right, Jeremy Diamond in Tel Aviv for us. Thank you very much. Let's break all of this down with our Middle East experts. And Barak Ravid, I'll start with you. How are these threats to quit the government from some key parts of Netanyahu's coalition likely to impact, first of all, tomorrow's security cabinet vote?
Hi, Wolf. So first, I think before that, we need to ask the question, why is the hostage and ceasefire deal hasn't been officially signed yet? The negotiators are still in Doha. As far as I understand, until 5 minutes ago, the deal hasn't been signed yet. There's a big question mark on why this thing is being delayed. And I think it is connected to why this Israeli cabinet meeting has been delayed and the full cabinet meeting has been delayed until Saturday night. And one official told me that this is all connected to, some issues that Hamas raised and some legal issues in Israel. But other officials raised the question of whether this is connected to the fact that Netanyahu wants this deal to be implemented not on Sunday, when Joe Biden is still the president, but on Monday, when Donald Trump assumes office.
Interesting. Susan Glasser, how much leverage does President-elect Trump have to push this agreement through?
Well, I would think a lot. Having already claimed credit for the agreement very publicly, doing so even before the terms of it were announced, Donald Trump, would certainly be very furious were Netanyahu or either of the parties to back out of it after he's already put himself into it. I do think this question of the timing that Barak mentioned is very interesting. You already heard Trump's incoming national security advisor speaking yesterday about the possibility for a Reagan moment, which is hearkening back to the 1981 dramatic split-screen release of the Iranian hostages on the day of Reagan's inauguration. And, frankly, I've thought for a couple months this was a very likely scenario that Netanyahu might want to deliver this kind of an image and this kind of political benefit to Donald Trump on the day of his inauguration.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens. Omar Shakir is with us as well. Omar, how do you see it? And could these latest Israeli airstrikes over the past day or two in Gaza impact the deal?
Look, I think civilians have been killed, starved, forcibly displaced, homes, schools, hospitals, infrastructure has been destroyed at an unprecedented scale in the recent history of Israel-Palestine. These atrocities must end immediately. The ceasefire won't do that on its own. It's critical that Israel allow in sufficient humanitarian aid, that it lift its blockade, that it restores electricity and water, because people will die, ceasefire or not, without that. Palestinian armed groups must immediately and unconditionally release all civilians held hostage. Serious crimes cannot go unpunished, and you must address root causes like Israel's apartheid against Palestinians. Hearing from Barak and Susan about some of these dynamics, we have to remember that lives are on the line. Just today, Wolf, we lost 2 colleagues in the human rights movement in Gaza, a staff member, Ihab Faisal, and his wife and 2 children of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. In one airstrike, another airstrike claimed Rafat Salah, who's the head of the Independent Commission of Human Rights in northern Gaza, along with 13 of his family members, his wife and 4 of their children. So these theatrics by Netanyahu and by others are resulting in bodies of Palestinians continuing to build up, more days that Israeli hostages remain in Gaza. So we need action immediately. The ceasefire won't do it on its own. Atrocities must end, and they must end immediately. The fact that we've been 15 months of this hell is simply inconceivable.
Barak, if this ceasefire hostage release agreement is formally signed, how do you think Netanyahu is likely to decide between giving into the demands of his extreme right-wing members or accepting support from his political opposition?
Well, Wolf, that's I think the $1 million question, because let's say the ceasefire does come into effect, the hostages starting to come out, there's a ceasefire in Gaza. We're talking about 42 days. That's a long, long time. And we're talking about Donald Trump that doesn't really want this war to resume. So in 42 days, Netanyahu will face an even bigger test of whether he wants to move to the second phase of this deal or he wants to break it and go back to the war. And he will need to make a decision on whether he chooses Donald Trump or he chooses Itamar Ben-Gvir. This is a very hard decision, especially that at any juncture in the past, Netanyahu chose his ultranationalist coalition partners and not the president of the United States, but then it was Joe Biden. I wonder what will happen when it's Donald Trump.
Susan, as you know, the White House and Secretary of State Blinken today are expressing optimism that this deal, this hostage release ceasefire deal, will still go into effect on Sunday, Biden's last full day in office. But given the delays and what we know now, do you think that's realistic?
Wolf, when you see the horror and how long it's taken even to get to this point, nobody can rule out a further delay. There's just no question about that, especially because, as Brock said, the choice here is a very painful one for Netanyahu. He risks the collapse at any moment of his far-right coalition government. Now, for now, Ben-Gvir has said he would not actually bring down the government, even if he would go out of the security cabinet rather than vote for this particular deal. So it's still a question mark for me about the exact timing of this. But the bigger question is it really the end of the war or not. And I don't think, despite all the big claims from Donald Trump, that we know the answer to that yet.
Yeah, we'll know in about 40 days when they supposedly go to phase 2. To all of you, thank you very, very much.